Welcome. Welcome to Washington Alliance. If you're a guest with us this morning, we are excited that you're here. Thank you for being a part of our morning and being a part of a bunch of crazies that we are here at Washington Alliance. But we somehow make it work, right? Now, family is. You just make it work. But no, we're excited you're here. And Merry Christmas. What a great time of year this is. And so we're ready to go. And I want to start us off with a question this morning. How many of you came into this place today with a problem? How many's problems sitting beside them? Do not raise your hand. That can create a really awkward lunch today. Don't do that. I want to paint a couple scenarios for us here today. The first one is this. I want you to imagine for a minute that you were training for a marathon. You've been training for months. I don't know what goes into it because I can't. It's hard for me to run from one end of the house to the other, but you've been training for months for this marathon, and you get into it, and you're running through this, and you're about mile 20, and you come up on this guy. He's got a shirt that says 50, fat, diabetic, but ahead of you. That would be a little discouraging, right? It'd be a problem for you. Like, I can't even beat this guy, you know. Or you're trying to get to Christmas dinner, and you're in China, and you're in this mess, a 50-lane superhighway. I didn't believe this at first, but I looked it up. This is real. It merges through this toll booth into 20 lanes and then into 4. Can you imagine that one? At one time, a few years ago, they were backed up for days, I think. One day in particular, 12 hours trying to get through this mess. That would be a problem. There would be some probably... speaking in different languages, different tongues. I don't know what would happen, but that'd be a mess, right? Very, very stressful. So every year, somewhere around this time, right before Christmas, we get together with my wife's family. She has got a large family on both sides, mom and dad. Our family's a little smaller, large in terms of numbers. And so we get together at somebody's house, and 30 or 40 of us are there, and this year was at her aunt and uncle's who had just moved back from North Carolina. They're living north of Pittsburgh. Beautiful house. We hadn't been there before, and so really excited to see it because they're just great people. And get together with everybody. Just crazies. Her side has crazy people too, which is crazy. But so we all get together, and they've got rooms everywhere. There's just 2 of them, but they got rooms everywhere. They got a downstairs that if we owned that house, my kids would never come upstairs. It's just like the perfect man cave, kid cave, get away from everybody cave, I guess. Big screen and just all kinds of good stuff. Well, like any good parent, you remind your kids when you're going to somebody's house how to act. Be respectful, even though it's family. You've seen these people for as long as you've been alive, but you still want to treat them with respect. And this is a new home. You want to treat this home with the utmost respect. They're very neat people. Everything was pristine. And then kind of one last bit of advice for your kids. Don't spill anything. Don't spill anything. So we were eating in the kitchen, and I get my plate, and I'm heading downstairs to the proverbial man cave, which is really awesome. Nice big bar set up where you can eat. And he's been there too. He knows what I'm talking about. And we get to the bottom step, and they've got, I don't know why they build houses this way, they've got a railing down the right side, and then there's a pole at the bottom with one of those round topper things on it. And as I got to the bottom step, that topper thing just jumped right off that pole and smacked me right in the elbow. I don't know why it did that. And instead of the plate going backwards, which it should have done, it went forwards and just everywhere, all over that beautiful carpet, splashed the wall, on the door. And I love when you do something like that because people just kind of stare like, oh. Stinks to be you, doesn't it? Well, you wouldn't think of that with your own family. It's like, seriously, we're all like related here. Well, I'm married into this relation, but still we're related. Well, my brother-in-law, who would typically take pictures, laugh, and tell the story, he bends down. We're cleaning up. My son's throwing me paper towels wet, and we're cleaning. But Uncle Jack, if you're watching this later in the week, I'm sorry again. I'll come back and clean it if I need to. But I tell you that because when it comes to problems, I'm leading the charge. I am ahead and I'm doing great. I've got more than I care to talk about. We'll be here all day if I get into that. But it's really what defines all of us, right? I mean, we all have problems in one way or another. You think you don't, the person beside you will remind you that you do. And it's just this time of year can really accentuate them. It can really bring them out, thinking about how am I going to pay for everything for Christmas. That bottom line in my checkbook just keeps getting lower and lower. There's family coming that, boy, I just don't get along with them. How are we going to make this work? Financial crisis in the home, sickness, and all of this stuff compiling and piling up. And you're like, this isn't really a happy time for me. And it's just problems in your mind, For kids, for instance, a major problem. They get through Christmas morning, they've unwrapped their gifts. It's a whole new record. They've done it faster than they ever did before. And they're just like, now what? What do I do? I just unwrapped 10 presents in a half a second. I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. It's over. Is there any more? Some of us like Christmas because it's a diversion. It can get us away from things that are waiting for us on the other side, and all of a sudden Christmas is over, and it's like, now what do I do? I got to go back. Some of us are dreading it for reasons that we've already mentioned and maybe others. Well, I want to make a case this morning with us to suggest that Christmas is not the end. Christmas is not the end. For those of us, it might just be a continuation of something beautiful that God's doing in our lives. Maybe for some of us here this morning, this might be the beginning for us. To do that, I want to take us to an Old Testament passage in the book of Ruth. It's towards the beginning of the Old Testament. If you have your Bibles and you want to follow along, jump in there with me. Ruth, we're actually going to work our way through this whole book this morning. We'll just kind of highlight some things. Incidentally, if you have your worship folder and you want to follow along, we've got some sermon notes for you just to be able to go back and revisit some of these things we talk about. Hopefully it can be of some help to you. But Ruth chapter 1, I want to start the story right at the very beginning. Ruth chapter 1, beginning in verse 1. It says this, "In the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and his 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife was Naomi. Their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. When they reached Moab, they settled there. Then Elimelech died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons. The 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, the other a woman named Ruth. But about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. This left Naomi alone without her 2 sons and her husband." I want us to pause for a minute and look at this family tree. So we see that Elimelech and Naomi, the patriarch and matriarch of this family, they have 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. All right? And a famine comes into their country or their town where they live, which causes crops to die, and landowners can't pay wages to their employees to take care of their land because of this extreme famine. That's a major problem, number one. So they decide to move. And they leave that place that's comfortable, what they understand the culture, and they go to a foreign land. A land where most would say don't go to. We don't associate with those people. But Elimelech knew that that's the only place we can really go and find refuge and hopefully get our life going again. But that's problem number 2. And we read then, Elimelech dies. He's removed from the equation. Problem number 3. Well, some years later or some time later, the boys, they find Moabite women, which is not encouraged either, to not only go there, but then you marry into this culture. So many would have frowned on that heavily. But these 2 boys, they marry Moabite women, problems 4 and 5. Well, we read 10 years later, somewhere around 10 years later, her sons die. Both of her sons die. And Naomi's left with 2 daughter-in-laws. She gets word that things back home are starting to look up. The famine has rescinded a little bit. Crops are growing again. And she said, well, I've got to get back home. So she gets prepared and begins to make the trip home. And she looks at her 2 daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth, and said, no, you stay here. It's better for you to go back to your families. I have nothing for you. There's no men. We can't have children. We can't carry on the family line. There's just nothing for you. Go home. And there's some arguing back and forth. And eventually Orpah says, okay, I'm going home. And she's removed. And you're left with Naomi and Ruth. Naomi is so discouraged. She even changes her name to Mara. Naomi meaning pleasant and Mara meaning bitter. I don't understand. It's a hopeless situation. Just call me Mara. Call me bitter. And can you imagine what you would have done in that situation? For Ruth, her family is back home where she's accustomed to, and she's going somewhere that she has no idea what waits for her. It was very interesting, her response. We see it later on in Ruth chapter 1. But Ruth replies, don't ask me to leave and leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, she says, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. I'm not sure I would have responded that way. I'm not sure that would have been the way what I did. I probably would have gone back. I mean, I've lost everything. I'm leaving my family. I've got nothing in front of me. I don't know what I'm going to. My financial freedom is gone. I mean, just my home is gone. And yet, Ruth says, no, I'm going to go with you. Phenomenal faith in something that she has no idea what waits, in the unknown. Now, that trip back to Bethlehem probably took 7 days or so. I'm sure there was a lot of conversation taking place, a lot of prayers. But Naomi knew a couple things. She knew something about her culture that Ruth would not have known. The big thing, one of the biggest things, is the fact that when landowners would buy a piece of land and begin to grow crops and harvest it, they would leave the outer edges for foreigners, people that are poor, widows, people like that. So they could come in and collect some grain. If the employees are going through even the center of the field and some grain falls, they would allow those people to come in and collect that as well. And Naomi would have known that. Ruth had no idea. Naomi also knew there's somebody, a relative on her late husband Elimelech's side named Boaz, who is, the Bible will tell us, in very good standing there. He's somebody who's a reputable man. He's well respected. He fears the Lord, and he's a great boss for his employees. His people speak so highly of him, and she's like, I've just got to get Ruth in there. I've got to get him to meet her, to get to know her, and I think he'll take care of us. There's a great possibility that he will do that. Naomi knew that. Ruth would have no idea. See, Naomi had a little bit of more of a picture than what Ruth had, which allowed her maybe to respond differently, allowed her to have a little bit of hope, even though it seemed hopeless. I don't know about you, but puzzles and I do not get along. I don't know if you get along with puzzles. It requires patience. And every time I pray for patience, God grants me patience in the form of the car not working, the kids don't listen, the cats throw up, all those types of things. So I've learned to kind of quit praying for patience. But when you have a puzzle like this one, it's got the number 1,000 on it. I'm assuming that's the number of pieces. There's something key to this. And if I were to put these together, this picture would be absolutely huge for me. I need this picture. I need to see it. I need to know what I'm doing. But if I were to give you this puzzle, and you take the bag out with all the pieces in it, and you break the bag, you put the pieces all over the floor, and then I took the box away, it'd be kind of hard. For many of you, maybe most of you, you wouldn't even, okay, put them all back in the bag. I'm not even going to venture to try it. Some of you are a little more daring, and I'm going to do it. But it helps having that big picture. It helps having it in front of me to see, okay, there's the border. Get the border done first, now fill in the middle, right? You see, God has our big picture. He has it all in his mind. He knows what it is. And so often, all the pieces of our life are all over the floor and in different places, and we're trying to put it back together, and it just doesn't fit. And more times than not, in my life, just about every single time, God's like, I know the big picture. Let's start there. Let me show you. Let me help you. Let me help put the pieces together and how this puzzle, your life, goes together. And that's so important. Slowly, ever so slowly, the pieces of this story are starting to come together. Naomi has a little bit of it, but God's got the whole picture. And so, in the process of knowing that, Naomi wanting Ruth to somehow get connected with Boaz, they get back to the homeland, to Bethlehem, and Ruth says, Naomi, let me go out and try to get some grain for us. I'll walk along the edges, I'll follow people. If any falls to the ground, I'll pick it up. And hopefully somebody will have favor on us and see that. And so she goes out, and Boaz comes along. She happens to be in the field, and Naomi, I'm pretty sure, would have directed her to that field. And Boaz comes along, and he's watching this, and he looks over and sees this girl and says, who is that? I don't know her. Where's she come from? And they tell him. And we pick up the story in chapter 2. Look how he responds to her. He went over, Boaz did, to Ruth, and he says, listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other field. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. Now, he does not know her. He's never met her. He doesn't know her. And he's having this compassion for her, this care for her. He goes on, he says, I've warned all the young men not to treat you roughly. And when you're thirsty, help yourself to the water they've drawn from the well. Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. What have I done to deserve such kindness, she asked. I'm only a foreigner. Yes, I know, Boaz replied, but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I've heard how you left your father and mother in your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done. I mean, that's amazing that Boaz would have that kind of compassion on Ruth, somebody he doesn't know, but he heard her story. He knows Naomi. He knows her family, being related to her late husband, Elimelech. And the compassion that he has for her, the love that he has for this family, and the dependency that Ruth has for him, again, a complete stranger. For Naomi, somebody that she's gotten to know more and more, obviously being her mother-in-law, but the dependency that she had. Something that we need to be reminded of, and I am all the time actually, is this book. This book that God has given us is his love language to us. This is God's book of love to you and I. From Genesis the whole way to Revelation, it is packed with stories and truths demonstrating God's love for us. And fully in that one verse that probably the most recognizable verse in the Bible, John 3:16. For God so loved the world, so much so that he allowed his son to come. So much so that he allowed his son to walk the earth. And so much so that he allowed his son to die and be risen from the grave so that we may have life. Then it goes on to say, not to condemn the world, but to save the world from something they can't save themselves from. That's love. And that's a dependency that we need to have for him. He loves us that much. And so the reality is that we have been designed by God to be loved deeply and daily, something that we've talked about before. God has designed us to be loved deeply and daily. Deeply, we can't even fully understand it on a regular, ongoing basis. But see, what happens is sometimes we allow the enemy to infiltrate himself into our lives, and he begins to allow us to think differently. That's not true. We are not loved that deeply. We can't be loved daily like that. And as we begin to believe that and to consider that for our lives of who we are, it changes our value system. It changes what we believe. And we see things with different glasses. We see things through a different lens, different perspective. And then we begin to value ourselves on one or more of these four things, and this can be very dangerous for us. The first thing is appearance, how we look. Secondly is achievements, what we have done in life, what we've acquired. acquisitions, what we own, what we can go out and buy, or associations, who we know. And as these become who we are and more of our value, how we see ourselves and what we think is important in our lives, one of two things happen. Either we think too highly of ourselves or we think too lowly of ourselves. We're too easy on ourselves or we're too hard on ourselves. And you look at Ruth, she had none of these things to offer. And she's like, who am I to you? I've got nothing. But Boaz says, that's okay. That's all right. I know what you've done. I know a little more about you than you realize. And a beautiful picture of the need and dependency we have for God. That's why Tim Keller says, don't let success go to your head. Don't let failure go to your heart. God loves us that much and He values us that much. And sometimes He uses other people to demonstrate that. He did that for Ruth in the form of Naomi. Naomi and Ruth go back to their homeland. Boaz enters the picture. God's using other people for them to see His big picture, which they can't fully understand yet. We have a partnership in Cambodia with some dear friends of ours, Sut and Sina Lau. Sut and Sina have been they were born and raised in Cambodia. They left, come back. Now they're international workers there. And every month they send us a blog of what's going on there in their ministry. And just Saturday morning I was reading this, and I want to introduce you to these two people here, this couple, Sam and Teon. Sam and Teon live in northern Cambodia. And their story, as far as Sina shares it with us, and just a few months ago, they are, Teon, the woman there, her health is declining and hasn't been doing well. And there happened to be a neighbor who is they're born-again Christians, began having conversations and getting to know Sam and Teon. And through that, they just tried to share God's love and serve them however they can and do things for them. And in the process, just have an opportunity to talk a little bit about their faith. And Sam and Teon were listening, but just didn't make a lot of sense to them. You see, they're strong Buddhists, as many people are in this country. And it's a tradition and it's a cultural thing. And to leave that religion can mean exile for many people. Exiled from their families, never to speak to them again. And even some of them, their lives could be in danger. And so that's certainly imprinted in the minds of these people. And so as the story goes, Teon, her health is declining a little bit. And one day they happen to go to a Buddhist temple, which is something they had to do. It's a tradition. It's a cultural thing. So they go and they're there for this service. And Sam sees something that he had never seen before. It may have happened before. He just never noticed it. As the plate's going around and monies are collected, he sees two prominent leaders in that Buddhist temple begin taking from that plate. And he's watching this and he said, what is going on? Theft is prevalent there. You don't make very much money. But he said, not from the leaders. Why would they do that? And what's that say about this religion? And can this religion even save me? These are things that Sam's trying to process. Well, a month or so later, Teon's health continues to decline, and witch doctors and other type of sorcery and other people can do nothing for her, and they eventually go to a provincial hospital. And $30 a day, they're spending time there, and their health is still declining, and the financial number is just declining rapidly. Well, word gets back to Sut and Sina. And they begin to help, and they get this family to an Alliance church there where they're staying, and people are treating them with kindness that they'd never experienced before, kind of an extension of their neighbors from back in their home. And then they get them to a provincial hospital with Christian doctors and nurses, and they're treated with dignity and respect, and they're just blown away by this. And they begin to tap into ministry funds that they have available to them to care for this family. And all of a sudden, her health begins to improve a little bit. And I want to pick up the story as Sina shares this. She said, a month ago, and that's a month from this month, Naomi had tearfully and hopelessly said goodbye to her 5 adult children and 11 grandchildren before leaving the hospital, not knowing if she would be alive to come back home. Through prayers and also kind and loving care treatments she received from concerned medical staff and from church families, Theon's health was improving. Both Sam and Theon were back in Long Vung, which is their northern Cambodian home. And after she and Sam prayed to receive Jesus Christ, Sam, the head of the family, took charge to remove and demolish all religious shrines and many worshipped items from around the house. He also cut off all spirit strings from the bodies of every family member. Immediately after prayer, we supplied Sam and Theon with Bibles, hymnal books, and MP3 radios, which do we even know what that is anymore? They use them all the time there. These radios contained an audio Bible along with many Bible stories which they often had played out loud every day. Sam and Theon had, with some of their grandkids, joyfully attend the Toll Preach Alliance Church. And watch this. Both Sam and Theon are studying with us and preparing to get baptized on Christmas Day. How cool is that? You see, God has the big picture, and He uses people, those neighbors, those people in that church at the provincial hospital, Soot and Sina, and other doctors and nurses, to share the love of Christ and for them to see that there's something more. There is hope in the midst of the hopelessness. And now this Christmas is going to be so different for them. They're going to get wet. Praise the Lord. What a beautiful picture of God's love for us. Well, the story goes on. And to shorten it up a little bit for time's sake, through Naomi's urging of Ruth, and she'll do whatever Naomi tells her, there's processes to put yourself in the graces of somebody who can redeem you and who can care for you and who can take care of you when you can't do it yourself and buy land for you. And Naomi knew Boaz could do that. But Boaz realizes there's another relative that's even closer. And he tells Ruth, I want you to stay, and I'm going to go talk with this person. And if he will redeem you, then he's the one to do it. But if not, I will do that. And when they had important meetings like this, it would take place at the town gate. And so Boaz goes to the gate, and he sets up there, and he has other elders come along to be witnesses for him. And the other relative comes to him, and they're having a conversation. He says, now, this is the situation. Will you redeem them? Will you be their kinsman redeemer? And the guy says, yeah, I can do that. And Boaz says, now, remember, you have to take Ruth as well. She has nothing. They have no kids. You need to take her as your wife. And immediately like, well, I can't do that. That's going to mess things up at home. That just doesn't work. I'm sorry, I can't do that. You need to do it. And Boaz says, okay, I will do that. But I needed to talk with you first. And when they would agree on something, they didn't do a handshake like we do today. They'd take off their sandal and hand it to him. You might want to try that in the future. If you make a deal with somebody, just take off your shoe and hand it to them. Everything's good. This is how it worked. And Boaz says, I will do that. And we want to pick up the story now in chapter 4. Look at this with me. So Boaz took Ruth, took her into his home, and she became his wife. And they slept together, and the Lord enabled them to become pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. The woman in the town said to Naomi, praise the Lord, who has now provided a redeemer for your family, a kinsman redeemer. This is somebody who's a male relative who'd have the responsibility on the behalf of somebody else that was in trouble or danger or in need. He would buy back, he would redeem, he would rescue a person in need who could not do anything for themselves. Sound familiar? This goes on. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth in your care and care for you in your old age. For he is the son of your daughter-in-law who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons. Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast, and she cared for him as if he were her own. The neighbor women said, now at last Naomi has a son again. And they named him Obed. And he became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. And some 28 generations later, we see King Jesus. God had the big picture. And he used this Moabite woman to one day usher in the King of the world that we celebrate this Christmas season, and every day for that matter. What a beautiful picture of who God is and what he wants from us and for us. His love that's beyond our comprehension. You see, Ruth believed in something, but she couldn't see the end. She believed in Naomi. Naomi believed that there's good to be had back in our homeland and that Boaz would be part of that. And Boaz probably didn't know exactly how this was going to turn out, but he had a belief system that was rooted in God and rooted in his just who God made him to be, and he's going to trust that. We'll work this out. It'll be okay. You see, what we believe rather dictates how we behave. Think about that. What we believe dictates how we behave. The chair you're sitting in, you believed it was going to hold you. You didn't come in and look underneath and check the legs and bring your pocket screwdriver and start tightening things and make sure nobody behind you was going to pull a junior high stunt and pull a chair out from under you. I mean, we didn't do that. We believe it's going to hold us. When we believe in something, it's going to dictate, it's going to cause us to behave in certain ways. It's just natural. It's what happens. And if we can think about, and I know this personally in my own life, the good that comes from the Father. Jesus, the author and perfecter of my faith, the fact that all source of life comes from Him alone, then I can trust Him with mine. Throughout this series, we've been looking at when Jesus invades us, His nature comes with it. Who He is comes with it. And when we embrace that and allow that to fill us, those types of things are going to come out of us. It has to. Things like love, joy, peace. God is the author of all of those things. That's who He is. He is love. He is full of joy. He grants peace in the most chaotic of situations. And when we embrace that and welcome that and receive that, it has to come out of us because that's who He is. But as important as all that is, there's one thing that I think is even more important than that. And what so many of us face so often. Ruth faced this. Naomi faced this. Sam and Tong faced this. A feeling of hopelessness. Nothing I can do. I can't see anything through the fog, through the trees. And the reality is, when Jesus lives in us, when we receive Him, He also gives us hope. And that's going to come out of us as well. Because He grants that. That's who He is and that's what He provides. It's a hope of something so much greater. A picture that we can't fully see and fully understand. And even in the hardest of times, the most difficult of situations, that hope can remain. Only found through Christ. Let me personalize this for just a few moments. I want to show a picture of my family. This is my whole family. They're not real big, but we're good. We love each other. That's good. The next picture is actually probably a more realistic picture. This is kind of what we're about. Just a lot of problems, a lot of craziness. It all comes from Mom. It comes from her side. Dad's more reserved, but Mom's got the goofy ones on her side, and probably a better picture of who we are. But we all got rocked pretty heavily back in June when Mom was not feeling well, and she's starting to turn yellow, which isn't a normal thing, and can't sleep and different things. And they finally get her to the doctor, and they do some tests and CAT scans and realize that there's a blockage in her pancreas. Things aren't draining the way they should, and the source of that blockage is a tumor that's on the end of her pancreas. And as the scans continued and they took the biopsy, they find that it is cancerous. And anybody who is walking through this, who has walked through this, do know what that word means and do not like that word. And your mind goes certain places. And so we embraced it. It's what it is. We're going to pray our way through it. And began treatments through a trial method, a treatment that she applied for, and she was granted out of Hillman Cancer Center in Pittsburgh. And we met this guy, Bob, who runs this whole trial department there, and just an awesome guy. Kind of ran away from the church and things, and Mom and Dad would always talk to him about it, and Mom would pray for him. And when she would walk in, Bob would look at her and say, "Oh, my angel, my angel." She'd give him a big hug, and Dad didn't get jealous, which I was a little worried about, but just a great atmosphere, considering what we're going through. And went through these trial chemo treatments and radiation, and got another scan to find that it had moved into her liver. And Bob was devastated, and he said, unfortunately, we can't be part of this treatment anymore. And so to continue, we want to put you on a different regimen, which will be much more intense. It would be every other week. You would come home with a bag and have more chemo for a couple days, and a nurse would come, a home health nurse, and take it out. And then we'll do it again, and by the end of January, we do another scan. And Mom prayed her way through that, like, what are we going to do, and I really want to do this, and I don't want to feel this way. And through some consultation with Dad and prayers from the family and just a phenomenal church family and pastor that they're a part of, they decide to go through these treatments. And after the first one, she goes and she's in a room by herself, which is really good, just her and Dad, and she's there by herself, and realized that, boy, this is much more intense. I wasn't prepared for this, She had her second treatment Thursday, and I talked to her Saturday morning, and I said, "How'd it go, Mom? How you doing?" And of course, you're getting poison in you, and it's affecting other things in her teeth and stuff. And she said, "Yeah, I wasn't expecting this. It's hard." But she said, I went in this room today, or Thursday, and there was 4 or 5 other people in there. And she's thinking, "Oh, come on, really?" And they're like, "Yeah, we just do that for the first treatment. Then you've got to be part of everybody. Other people are going to be in your room with you." I said, "Oh, okay, well, it is what it is." And she's just like, she said, "Brian, I saw this older lady, and I had some conversations with her, and I knew she loved the Lord, and you could see it, but these others, it was so sad." She said the hopelessness that just engulfs them, it's their face, who they are, and just you could see it, and the spouses that were there, and family members, and she said, "Brian, it was so sad." And she said, "I had some conversations with people, and knowing Mom, she says what she thinks. She has a hard time sometimes keeping things to the chest, right? But she said, I just had to say to this one lady," she said, "God is so good." She said, "God is so good." And she said, "Without Christ, there's no hope." It's not profound per se, but wow, is that ever profound? Did that make any sense? It sounded good in my head. I don't know if it came across right. But even in the hardest of times, there's still hope. Because there's a bigger picture. There's something that awaits me. And Mom's like, "Honey," I said, I don't know what's going to happen. We're praying, but we're just trusting the Lord. I'm thinking, "Mom, you got so much more faith in me. Are you free Sunday morning? Because there's a family that needs to hear this at Washington Alliance, and you do so much better than me." But I say all that not so much for what we're going through, but the reality of what Christ gives us. I want you to know, if you're here this morning, there's a crisis in your life, there's a disturbance at home, there's a prodigal son, there's a financial mess, whatever it is, that there is hope, and this does not have to be the end. For those of you who have received Christ and He's your Lord and Savior, and He's giving you those things, love, joy, peace, hope, this is a continuation. This just keeps on going. But for some of you, maybe have even one that don't have that this morning, I want you to know that this is not the end. Christmas is not the end. It can be the beginning. You know, Jesus said in the Gospel of John, he was talking to a group of people and he said, you know, there's only one way to the Father. You want to get there? There's only one way. Jesus said, it's through me. He said, I am the way, truth, and life. He went on in another passage, he said, I am the resurrected life. Even though you may die, you have life. Imagine that. Even though you physically may die, and 1 out of 1 dies, the stats don't lie, you can have life. By dying, you're living. And even in your situation, you're still living because there's hope. There's something greater on the other side. You know, to be redeemed as Ruth and Naomi and that family was, it's to recognize that you're going down the wrong path. You're going down in a direction that you have no control over and you need somebody. And to receive that redemption, to be bought back, is to say, now I'm going to go down the right path. I'm going to go down a different path that's better. And they received that, the beautiful picture of Jesus Christ coming to earth to buy us back, to redeem us, to be our kinsman redeemer, and put us on the best path, the right path, the path that leads to the Father. I want to take a moment, and I can't let us end without asking you, if you're here this morning and you don't have that hope, this could be your beginning. By simply receiving Him for what He did, accepting His grace, His mercy, that He may give you hope. That Christmas may not be the end for you. For others who have received that, but boy, life has just been throwing darts, may I tell you, God's in it. Even though you may not see it, He has the bigger picture. Trust Him. Cry out to Him. Allow Him to put those pieces together for you. And He'll reveal it one piece at a time, one step at a time. Can we take just a moment, bow our heads, close our eyes for a moment as the music plays? If you don't have that hope, if you don't have the assurance of eternal life, and you need and want our ultimate kinsman redeemer, Jesus Christ, to come in and save you, you can do that right here this morning. The greatest decision you'll ever make. To simply acknowledge Jesus is who He is, said He is. To ask Him right now, Jesus, come in and save me. I'm a sinner and I can't save myself. I need you. I need you to redeem me. I need you to buy me back. I need you to save me of what I can't save myself from. To believe in your heart that Jesus died for you and rose again. You will be saved. You know, if you have prayed that prayer, you know there is a party in heaven like none other. The angels are rejoicing on your behalf. It's a beautiful thing. And we want to come alongside of you. God has never orchestrated a plan that you walk alone. He doesn't want that for any of us. That's why He gave us the church and the people inside of the church that make up the church, the family, to come alongside, and we want to do that with you. And if you prayed that this morning, you have the assurance of eternal life. On the back of your worship folder, would you fill that out? And would you drop that in the box back here? We want to pray with you. We want to give you some resources. We want to celebrate with you. If you're dealing with a crisis, if you've got stress in your life, you've got things that are happening and you just need somebody to pray for you, we jot a couple things down. It needs to be private at will, and we will pray for you. We will come alongside of you and do our very best to help wherever we can. We're not made to walk alone. May this be a season of rejoicing Christmas not be